It is Motty here from Smak HQ. Hope everyone's had a great Easter. It has been a very unusual Easter, I will say that. Sitting at home, bored. I'm getting sick of sitting in my boat. I'm getting sick of looking at different things. So we thought we might do, I don't normally, this time of year we're flat out, so we don't normally get a time to do any of this stuff. Even though I've been doing spinnerbaits for all these years and all the other stuff that we do, we just never get a time to do it. So we thought, why not have time now? Well, we got a bit of time to talk about it, and hopefully we can give you some ideas and some different things that when we are allowed to go out fishing, that you can go out there and do that and use some of these tricks, a little bit of stuff behind the scenes of what we've been doing, obviously making our spinnerbaits all these years. We do have the hostess with the mostest here, Tracy. How you going, Trace?
Hey guys, how you doing? Just sitting in the background most of the time.
We got Tracy here because she is the tech guru. I've actually finally worked out how to turn the computer on, and that's a start, but that's as far as I'm going to go with it. So that's why Tracy's here today, to give me some questions and any of that sort of stuff. So, guys, if you want to jump into it, send us some comments, some questions that we can do. But what I'm going to start with is, I suppose for the guys who don't know, my name's Matthew Mott. I've been a tournament angler. I own tackle shops. I own Smak lures. Have been making spinnerbaits for about 18 or 19, might have been 18 or 19 years, maybe a bit less than that, but a long time. And I suppose where we started the first time, it goes back a long way. The first time we ever used spinnerbaits realistically, we'd always got a few spinnerbaits. My brother was over in America, so we always used to get a few spinnerbaits from Bass Pro in the sort of middle 90s. But I was actually contacted one day by Ron Sattler, who owned the Bass Lodge down the Macrae River, and you would know it now as Bassman Spinnerbaits. He came up, booked me in, would be probably 97, 98 on a charter. We went out for the afternoon, and he said, mate, I want you to try these and see what you think. First impressions, I've seen them before but never really used them. The first impression of a spinnerbait was, really? This is what we're going to do? Anyway, about fifth cast, caught a bass at Bunduma, used them for the afternoon, and sort of it all went from there. And then he started Bassman Spinnerbaits, and obviously when he first started, a lot of it was Americanised. And then in the following years, we worked out that our fish were different, and a lot of the stuff you see about spinnerbaits, obviously on YouTube and Facebook and all that, is Americanised. And there are things that we do grab, and it is used over here, but then there's a lot of things that aren't. And I suppose really where it came into its own was in 99, Steve Morgan started ABT. We went down to the first one. I think it was at Maroon. Might have been Maroon. Yeah, it was at Maroon, I think. Maroon. Anyway, no, it was Mugra. That's right. And Harry won throwing spinnerbaits. Straight after that, Ron got in contact with me. We'd done a couple of different spinnerbaits from there. Went to the next comp, and I think it was on the 27th and 28th. I think it was March 1999 at BP Dam, and I came second. And Robbie Smith, good mate of mine, Robbie Smith, who charters down the coast now, he came first, and that was the first time that I actually got a top 10 using a Bassman spinnerbaits in the very early days. So we had a lot to do with that, and I did that for a few years, and then obviously then Glenn and Sue, Ron passed away, and Robin was running it, and we were helping Robin out for a fair while, and then Glenn took it over, and we both went our separate ways, and so that's how long I've been using spinnerbaits in Australia. So one of the first guys to really get it in, and as I say, the development of what we've done now to what used to be out there was pretty impressive. So I've been using them for a long time. I started making them, I think it was in 2003. So it's been 17 years, and just been going on everything for that. So we just thought now's the time to talk about some of the techniques. So have we got any comments coming through as yet there, Trace?
Yeah, we sure do. We've got a couple of people wishing y'all happy Easter for that side. So I just want to say happy Easter to everyone. So first question, we can park any of these questions if it's more that what you're going to come into. So Calissa's asking, depending on water temperature, what is the best colour to use?
Colour's not so much on water temperature. It's more on the clarity of the dam, what your dam is looking like. Now, you've got basically three. You've got dirty, you've got muddy dams, you've got dams that are tainted. So dams like BP, Barumba, where you've got a lot of timber in there and there's a bit of a taint through the water. And then you've got dams like Sinclair, Glenbourne, which are crystal clear. So that really depends on what colours. So when it comes to dirty colours, dirty dams, we like to use blacks, dark browns, darker colours. White's not a bad colour. I've got one here where there's a bit more advanced stuff. White's a good colour, and another colour that we obviously use in muddy water is orange, is another really good colour. It stands out, but using, I don't know if you can see that, using the white blades. This is stuff that I use a lot. It mightn't be out there in the public arena, and I reckon we'll get through to that stage, but at the moment, that's what we're using. And then when you get into the more tainted dams where there's a lot of standing timber, black is a really good colour for those areas, and dark purple, because they have a really good contrast and it's easy for those fish to pick it up. And then in clear colour, clear dams, really crystal clear, that's where you get into your really natural. That's when you get stuff that looks like, that where it's basically nearly see-through, and you're just trying, white's another good colour. All you're trying to do is imitate the bait that's in that dam, because obviously they can use their lateral lines, but they can see that bait a lot easier as well because the water's so clean. So that's where it comes into that. But before we go too further with it, let's just break down the spinnerbait to start with. So I've got some bigger blades here. In Australia, the main ones that we use is obviously that, which is called a willow blade. It's long, slender, long. What it does is it doesn't give out a heap of vibration, but you can see how much flash as it's spinning. So that's the one we use for when we're trolling, or you're burning spinnerbaits, or you just want to get that reaction bite. You want those fish to pick it up. The next thing we use a lot of in Australia is obviously is your Colorado. So what that Colorado is designed to do, obviously you can see compared to the willow, pick it up here, it's a lot rounder, so therefore it doesn't give as much flash, you can't burn it as fast, but it gives you a lot of vibration off the access point. The other one that I use a lot, and something that we might try and do a lot more in Australia, is this one. This is called an Indiana. Now, it's very popular. I use it a lot. Now, that's in between. You can see it's still got that rounded shape, so it's still got it rounded, but it's sort of in between a willow and a Colorado. And then same with this one. Everyone would know what this one is. This is a mag willow, and it's the same sort of principle. It's in between, gives you a lot of vibration, but also gives you that flash because of that lateral line and how long it is. Then you've got things like, you've got all different ones. You can see there you've got your dinted, which actually just reflects light a little bit more and gives it a little bit more light contrast. Then you've got your fluted ones, which actually
Motty,
create a different...
Sorry, yes. When you're showing it, can I just get you to go a little bit slower to the screen, if that's okay?
There you go.
Yeah, just hold it up. Yeah.
Righto. So that just gives you a little bit. So these are things that hopefully in time we'll be using a lot more of. But at the moment, we're just keeping it pretty standard. The standard spinnerbait, obviously, that everyone sees and everyone knows about, is just what you call a tandem, which has a willow on the back and a Colorado on the front. Righto. Sort of that breaks down the colour. So colour just comes in. General rule, darker the water, darker the colours. If it's really, really dark, if it's really dirty, dirty water, try and go those brighter colours. That's when your chartreuse, your white. Colours like those will sort of come into their own. You can see that's out there. Orange is another good one too that we have here. And these are things that I use, that I've made up for myself. And when it gets a bit more, which we're used to, the dams like the Doomba, Somerset, all these dams that, have got good visibility, but, they're not super, super clean. So that's where you can just try different days, different colours on the day. Sometimes it's dark, sometimes it's light. It really depends on what mood those in, and that's why you can't just use one colour. And then down south, obviously with those dams down there, which have got visibility is unbelievable, that's where you really natural colours into it. Use a lot of silver blades down there, not a lot of gold, but you use a lot of natural colours with silver, because that's what those fish are, that you're trying to hone into what those fish are eating. And that it's more sight fishing. They can see it a lot better down there, where up here it's more of that lateral lines, and then once they pick it up, and if they like that colour, that's when they'll come in. Okay.
So I've got another question, Motty. You were talking about like the colour of the water to the difference. Now, does the weather pattern, say for example, you have a very clear blue sky with the sun shining on that, but you've got dirty water, or you might have very clear water and you've got overcast rainy day. Would that take any effect into the colours that you would use as well?
Definitely. There is, what people have got to realise is there is no magic bullet. There is no one thing that's going to work every time. That's why we call it fishing. So there's some basic rules that you can stick to. You know, dark days, dark colours, light days, light colours. That's all thing that we can, you know, the old one that everyone used to talk about. But that's not always the case. One thing I can say, don't be afraid to experiment. I find that's happening a lot now. People are not experimenting. Experiment with different things. Go out there and trial. That's how in the early days when we discovered all this stuff, that's how we got to where we are now. There was nobody telling us what we could do. We didn't know. So you might have something, that a little technique that you might have worked out that is absolutely braining them. And that's fine if you want to keep it to yourself. But don't be afraid to try something different. It's not going to hurt. But, you know, you need to trial that. There is not one magic bullet, and that's what makes fishing so good, especially bass fishing or yellows or cod. There isn't just one thing that works all the time.
No, that's really interesting. Another thing as well that I'm curious about is obviously, like you're talking about experimenting and everything. You've got, you know, your spinner. Do you guys ever put stinger hooks on the back of them?
Stinger hooks is something that in the early days no one ever did. We used to do double skirts. We used to have bigger hooks in them, no hooks in them, all those different things. Obviously, there are brands out there that have them and there are brands that don't. With us, obviously here at Smak, we have the stinger hook already done, and the stinger hook you can see is still hiding in that skirt, and that's what it's designed to do. We also put a glow bead on there, which actually just, when you look at it underwater and it's a bit darker, it just gives it that little bit of fluorescence in the middle of the body. So there's something a little bit different. Sometimes you don't need to run that stinger hook on there. If times when you're fishing a lot of timber and the fish are really aggressive, by having that stinger hook in there can make it a little bit less snag proof, so you can take it off. You know, if you're fishing in a creek, you're fishing in that, don't need the stinger on there. Those fish will eat it pretty well. The other times is obviously when you're fishing in a dam and you're just fishing weed beds or out in the open or trolling them. That's where it really comes in, where you want that stinger hook in. But you want it so it's still trying to sit inside. You can see how it's still sitting inside the skirt. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to match that stinger. So if he comes up and nips the back or nips that skirt, that's what's going to hook onto it.
Cool. So the other day we were talking, because I don't know a lot about spinnerbaits, and we were talking about the start to finish production of how you guys actually make them as well. This morning I jumped on your website, and I've also got Sean Ezzy asking the same question as well. Is I noticed that you've got 5 different types of spinnerbaits, and he's also wanting to know the difference between them. Would you chase different fish, or why do you have 5 different types of spinnerbaits?
Right. Basically, it's like hard bodies. It's like anything. We started off in the hard body game. You can't have one hard body that's going to catch fish every time. It all comes down to action. So you'll come into basically everyone's got certain spinnerbaits. So you've got your standard, which is what everyone, doesn't matter what brand you make, it's just your tandem, which can have tandem willows on it. It can have tandem Colorados on it. but that's pretty much the standard one that we see in Australia most of the time. The other option is obviously your single. Now that can be a smaller Colorado, it can be a willow, it could be something a bit bigger. And then we have the mag willow style. Bassman calls it Yellowmans, stuff like that. So that's a different. Let's start with this one, the main one. So this one here is what we use probably 80% of the time. A lot of times you're using those spinnerbaits is in this time of year, coming into autumn or coming out of winter into spring, when those fish, you've got those weed beds starting to pick up, and you want to be you're fishing the weeds or you're fishing the timber when the fish are starting to move, or at the moment they're feeding up, getting ready to go into that really deep section. So throwing that is just, that there is like your burning one. Because it's got the willow on the front, on the back, you can wind that really fast, and then your Colorado will give a little bit of thump. The difference with these, with what we've done with ours compared to a few other guys, is that we make that neutral. So what it is the torque off that blade and the torque off this blade equals the weight of the lure. So when you throw it out and you wind it, it'll stay wherever you count it down to, that's where it'll stay. Then we get into, obviously, your single-bladed. The difference is with these are a little bit shorter arms, but the difference why you would use a single blade, if you think about it, there's a lot less going on. So you might have gone and you've whacked a heap of fish with this and they've started to shut down. Well, then you can go over it with something with a single blade, whether it's a Colorado or a willow. It's just a smaller, more compact, less things going on profile. So when those fish have got a bit used to something like a normal spinnerbait, you can try and do something like that, because, as I say, it's more just that one little blade that's spinning around. This is folded in, not as much going on. Then we get to this style, which is realistically you can have it with the mag willow, or you can have it with the double Colorado. These you actually wind slower. It gives you a lot more thump. And if you wind those faster, what happens is if you're winding it faster, the torque off these blades will make it rise. So if you try and burn them like you do this one, doesn't matter what brand it is, the weight of the head and the lure, the torque from these spinning will make it rise. So these ones here are something as when those fish are really shut down, you're just yellows, bass, cod, you're just trying to get a couple of bites, and that's why you use something like that. It's slower, it pulls more water, and you're actually just trying to get that vibration. You're trying to get them to strike at it, and that's the difference with the blades and why we have them that different way.
Okay, cool. So, which one would you use to go trolling for? And what's it actually called? Has it got a name that you've got a specific trolling
Okay,
one?
so our biggest two trolling. So trolling became really, really popular in the early trolling spinnerbaits, I suppose, come really popular in the early 2000s, and now has really come back into its own. And that's why we made this 5/8, and that's why it's got the blades that it has on it. Because if I put a little bit bigger blade on that, or a little bit blade on the front, what will happen is the torque from those blades spinning will actually make it rise. Because we wanted to try and make a spinnerbait, that's what makes ours different, we wanted to make it as neutral as we can. So the further you let this out, that's where it'll stay. Doesn't matter how fast you troll it. And the further you let it out, so that spinnerbait there, you control it 5 feet underwater, or you control it 80 foot underwater, depending how far you come back. If I was to change the front blade and put like that size on, which is, you look at them there together, it doesn't seem a lot of difference. You cannot troll it. Because what happens is the torque from the water will actually start making that spinnerbait lift. And then I suppose about 7 or 8 years ago, it might have been a bit longer, we came up with, which every bass tournament pro, we sell thousands of them This was the mini coupe. Now, this was something totally different. It took me 18 months to get that to swim exactly how we wanted to. And now that's sort of taken over. We make all the wires and bend them up a certain way. Now it looks really weird, and how it works is totally different than what a normal spinnerbait works. And it works in certain times, and other times it doesn't. But so that there trolling is, once again, it's designed to cast, and what it was designed for is to fish in deep situations, or obviously a lot of guys are trolling with them. But it's same again. I can throw that in 30 foot of water on a spinnerbait, throw it 30, 40 foot of water, let it sink to the bottom, and slow roll it, and it will stay on the bottom because that's what it's designed to do. So that's your Smako. It's got a little bit different vibration in it, and once again, yeah, it's got the stinger hook on it. You can take it off. You can put a plastic on it, all those sorts of things.
No, that's really awesome. So when you're talking about the trolling side of it, would you advise, obviously you've got your lure that you think you're going to be able to troll with. How would you determine how far back and what sort of trolling speed there would be? Is it a trial and error, or do you have a suggestion that someone can go out and give it a go on like a speed?
Basically, obviously you want to use the lightest line you can. Braid, mono doesn't really work. I mean, not many people use mono much anymore. Braid's definitely the way to go. Buy the braid that you can afford. Anything nowadays, anything from probably £10 and less is really what you want to go. And as I said, it comes back to the further you let it back, the deeper it'll go if you're going to troll spinnerbaits. And the other thing is to keep that rod as close to the water as you can. You see a lot of people have them in the boat and they'll have their rod sticking up there. What that's doing is, as that lure is trying to go down, especially because it doesn't have a bib on it, your rod's trying to turn it back up. So the closer you can keep it to the water, and then when it comes back to letting it out and making sure you got enough line out, that's just trial and error. The easiest way, what I do, I've done videos on it before, is what we do is we just put our motor into gear. We'll say, right, let them go now. If I'm doing charters, let the line go, and all you do is you look behind you, and where your motor started spinning, that's where you actually started. So you'll go, okay, this time it might be a count, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, whatever you want to count, might be at 20, might be at 30, might be at 40, and you can just vary it. Obviously now with live scope and all that, I can see exactly where my lure is, but for the people that don't have that, that's how you want to do it. You want to have one, stop one now, leave one run a little bit longer, bang. And then you'll sort of get a bit of a go during the day. You'll get an idea of how far back you need to run it. Okay, it's a count of 20, it's a count of 30. It's the same as what it is with hard bodies. But you've just got to remember with that lighter line, you might have to let it back a little bit further. So, but the basic rules of what you're doing in trolling will work the same. The difference what a spinnerbait does to a hard body, especially after Christmas or Christmas when it gets really, really hot, where it comes into, if you think about it, hard bodies doing this massive action like that. And those fish aren't feeling that good. The water temperature's hot, whether that's bass, yellows, cod, whatever it is, extremely hot. They're not as aggressive. They're not moving around as much. So the next minute, this lure is doing this. If they need to eat it, they've got to put all their energy in, that little bit of energy that they have to eat that lure. But if you see a spinnerbait coming along, whether it's this size, bigger, whatever it is, and all it is this blade moving, like that, and it's just a nice subtle. We don't want this blade moving so much. We want to keep it nice and subtle. This is what this keeps the blade spinning. It's just that little smack. It's just that little snap. It's just something to go, you know what, I don't have to put a hell of a lot of energy into eating that spinnerbait, and that's why they work so good, and a lot of people are using them now when it comes to, say, Christmas time and after, because those fish, when they're not feeling 100% and really, really aggressive, that subtle bite is what you'll catch if you're trolling them on a spinnerbait.
So, another question. You mentioned that you can see where the spinnerbait is sitting because you've got live scope. So, there's been a couple of questions that I've asked as well as I'm curious. So, when I'm, say for example, like I'm seeing fish dead on the bottom. So, like if I was fishing, say for example, a vibe, I would count down how many seconds for it to hit the bottom. If people don't have live scope and they're trolling, how would they know how far they've gone down? One, there was a question of should they let it sink and then start trolling so they know it's on the bottom, or what would you suggest?
The easiest thing to do is to go out, if you're really doing a lot of trolling, obviously, if that's your thing, getting a 5/8 spinnerbait, and just make sure we talked about them blades. The best thing to do is, but just go out one morning or one afternoon when the fish aren't biting and nothing's happening, just troll it. So go over your spot on your sounder and say, righto, that comes down to most of the fish I'm catching are at 15 feet, right? Troll over it. Let it out. Troll over that spot. Okay, that was a count of 10. That was a count of 20. That was a count of 30. Then you might work out, okay, on my boat and the speed that I like to troll, I had to let it out on a count of 30 to get it to hit at 15 feet. Then you've got to gauge, because it's not going to change. Then you've got to gauge. So by doing that simple little fact that we all do, then you can go out and the next time you go, well, if the fish are sitting at 25, I need to let it out another 10 seconds. Or I'm fishing here, the fish are at 12, 30's at the 30 count, I'm at 15 feet, so I want to have it up a little bit higher, so I'm going to wind it in a little bit closer. Now, that'll depend on how fast you like to troll, what you normally, but everyone has their little, what they're going to do 90% of the time, and that's how originally I did it. I went out, I found a spot in the dam that I knew came up, throw it out the back, okay, count of 15. No, didn't hit the bottom, turn around, throw it out, count of 20. Okay, now I'm hitting the bottom where I've got it sitting when I'm trolling. Right, that's where I need it to be. And then I can work it out from there to work out how. When the big thing is, like we learned this, Scully taught me this when we were learning fly fishing all those years ago. When you're doing your count, the biggest thing, and that this doesn't matter whether you're counting for spinnerbaits, counting trolling, counting any sort of fishing, you must keep that count the same. Because what happens is, used to be with it 1 Mississippi 2 or 1 and 2 and 3. But what happens is if you're excited, we all do it, and I used to do it all the time, is I'd cast out a fly, same thing as a spinnerbait, and it might be a count of 5. I'd throw it out, and they'll bite, and I'd be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'd wind in. I didn't get a hit. So I had to work, then I worked out, and obviously that I had to keep my count exactly the same every time. So if it's 1 and 2 and 3, whatever that is, if you keep that the same in anything you do with bass, shallows, or cod fishing, or any sort of fishing, especially up here because we do a lot of stuff for suspended fish, that is the number one secret. Keep that count the same, so it doesn't matter where you go, you'll know where that lure is, a spinnerbait, whether you're trolling it or whether you're casting it into the timber. It's a count of 5, a count of 6, a count of 3, a count of 2, whatever it is. Keep that count exactly the same, and then you will know exactly where that lure is every time you throw it.
Now, that's really good. So it's something that you've mentioned, that's the second time. It is really a lot of trial and error that you need to go and do by the sounds of it. So obviously everyone wants to catch fish, but I guess doing that trial and error will give it a workout. The other thing I just want to know from you, Motty, is can you just do a general, what are the different weight sizes that you've got available for each one?
So most of your weights and sizes, so most spinnerbaits are made 1/4, 3/8, half, 5/8. You'll get 1 ounce, 2 ounce for cod. The reason we're still talking ounces just because it's easier. It's what everyone does. Everyone says, why are we talking ounces? Why are we talking feet? Why are we talking meters? Why aren't we talking meters? The reason being is feet for us is a smaller increment. It's easier to say those fish are at 20 feet rather than 8.12 metres. It's just a smaller increment. And with the weights, it's just something that we've all grown up with. If you're into fishing, it is either a 5/8 or up. And that come to the very early days when we were all bringing spinnerbaits in and we're getting them from America, and they were all 1/4 ounce, 3/8, half, and 5/8. It's just the generic. Everyone knows what that is now. Just got to remember that, obviously, when you're using trolling, you'll use a 5/8 lures like that. When you're casting timber or casting to the weed, the lighter the spinnerbait, the slower it'll sink, the more you can keep control of it. But then the lighter the spinnerbait, the slower you have to wind. If you're going to go and throw a 1/4 ounce and burn it, what's going to happen is what we talked about before. It's actually going to rise. It's not going to sit in the water column. As soon as you start, it'll burn. Doesn't matter what blades have got on it. So you just got to remember that the lighter you go, it's going to sink slower, and a lot of times that'll work, but you can't burn them as fast, because what will happen is not only will that rise, a lot of spinnerbaits is something that you want to have a look at, what brand it is, before you do it. This is something that I do on every lure that a lot of people don't, and this is probably a little tip that I tell people that come on charters. I don't care whether it's a spinnerbait, a hard body, a blade, or whatever. The one thing that 99.9% of people do not do, as soon as you buy that lure or get that lure in, swim it beside your boat. See what it's doing. See how it swims. Pull it fast, pull it slow. See what reaction. Because what you'll find with a lot of spinnerbaits is what people don't understand. If you change them blades, and some people do make spinnerbaits, what happens when you start winding them fast? It'll roll like that. Because of the torque of this blade, whatever blade it'll be, is too much, and the weight's not heavy enough as a keel to be able to keep that spinnerbait straight. So just if I was to get that one in this one here and wind that really fast with those blades, what you would see happen is it'd start doing that, because I'm winding it too fast. Get it beside your boat or get it on the bank before you throw it. Doesn't matter what lure it is. Just try it in the water to see. That way, in your mind, you'll get an idea of what you're doing. The amount of people, pros, whoever they are, who actually do not know what a lure does. I mean, we're lucky enough we've got the swim tank here, but do not know what that lure actually does and how it's supposed to perform. Once you do that, you'll be able to work out some little tricks and techniques that maybe no one else has thought of that'll actually make you catch more fish. So that's just a little tip as far as that goes.
No, that's really cool. For the hot tips as well, I'm sure everyone would love those ones, just to give them a test and trial. There's a couple of questions more about, not so much about the lure itself, but a suggestion of, would you actually use a clip, like to clip them on and off? Or the other question that we've got as well is, what type of knot are you using to tie on it?
I'm just using a normal, basically. I'm tying, so with ours we have them open-ended. On these ones, on a Smacko with the twist on the eye that we do, it doesn't make as much difference because it can actually have a swivel point. It doesn't affect it too much. So you can put a clip on that one. That's not a drama.
What's that one there, Motty?
So that one's there on the Smacko. You can see how we got a lot of guys will use twisted eyes. The problem with twisted eyes on a normal spinnerbait like that, is if you think of that thing is coming through the water like this, if you have a big bulge point on the front, it can actually change the way that lure swims through, because that water's coming through it. So I like to have it with no clip, tie it directly on there like you would a standard hook blood knot like everyone uses, that you tie that on. Do not use a clip, because in this situation, you want it to be able to track dead straight, especially when you're trolling. With these lures, with a hard body, you can use a clip, but with these, when you're trolling them, the more stuff you have on the front here, the more drag that you will get. And because this doesn't have a bib, then you're going to affect. It might only be a half a foot, it might be a foot, but you will affect on how that lure swims. So that's why we try and keep the front of those as clean as we can in this sort of situation. Obviously, when you get your big cod ones and you've got, your twin spins and all that sort of stuff, different sort of circumstance. You're using a heavier weight. You're trolling it really, really slow, if that's the case, or you're casting them really, really slow. So you want that lure to get that thump. You're chasing a fish that's, massive. He's not really worried about how much line you've got it off the front, but a bass and yellow will. So that's the difference between your cod ones with your twin spin and having all this stuff at the front, and you can use a clip compared to your single ones.
So you're talking about, like, you've done a difference between, say, bass, yellows and cod. So obviously I'm a barra fisherman. Could I cast or troll for, like, either dam barra or saltwater barra as well? And what would you suggest?
You can. I've caught a fair few barra on spinnerbaits. They different than what you think they would.
In freshwater?
Freshwater and salt. The secret that I'm probably going to tell you, which I probably shouldn't, but I will.
Maybe don't tell them. Maybe tell them offline to me only.
Okay, the secret what we found. So you would traditionally think that a barra would love that silver blade on a spinnerbait. That you would think there's no reason why he shouldn't eat it. But the way that, obviously all the fish that we've caught, all the barra that we've caught, we worked out that the secret to catching barra, it wasn't so much that you wanted that flash. It was you still wanted the flash, but you didn't want too much. So what we use for our barra, is that it is a black blade. Now I've caught a lot of barra on spinnerbaits. I tend to use a single. I tend to use one of our mini coupe style with one blade on it like that. A little bit heavier one. I use it with obviously this size hook. That's a 9.0 hook. I use it with that. And instead of having the twins, I'll run it with one single black blade in either a willow. I do not use Colorados because you're not really any guys who chase barra realise it's not about having heaps and heaps to thump. It's more to have that subtle roll. Otherwise, why aren't we using, big plastics with tails on them like that? We don't. We tend to use ones that have got a little bit of roll and sideways action. So that's what we're trying to get with this. Put a little bit bigger blade. It'll give it a little bit of roll, but with that black single blade on it, mainly a willow, is the dynamite one for using for barra. It's not exactly what you think. They're different than cod. So that's why a lot of big cod lures and spinnerbaits haven't really taken off for barra. So I went through that for a couple of years and then I finally clicked on it and worked it out, and I have had a lot of success. I actually have got one that I've caught a lot of fish in. Bretty Turner was in the boat with me and we absolutely smashed him, and I've caught fish on it this year up in the ABT barra, and I've kept it a secret a long time. I do have a bigger version of that with a big heavy jig head on it with a spinnerbait with a single black blade on it, and I've run that and caught a lot of fish on it. Anyway, there you go.
No, that's really, really cool hot tips sort of thing, because obviously for me, I thought about using spinnerbaits for barra fishing, but I've just never gone and done it. So with those as well, on a personal thing, you're talking about black blades. So is it something that I would have to modify, or can I just buy it from your store?
Oh, you can buy black blades. There's a few different places on the web you'd be able to find them pretty. I mean, you can get them off us, but yeah, we don't have. They're hard to get. They can be hard to get, but you want that black lacquered blade. That's the one that you want to get.
No, awesome. Things that we've spoken about previously is we're getting actually a lot of questions asking about rod and reel combos. You and I both agree that your combo is something very personal. What I use and what I like could be completely different than your actual setup. But their watches
okay,
are...
I can answer that in a couple of different ways. So okay. Obviously rods, I use Dobbins, but you can use whatever brand you want to use. The big thing with spinnerbaits now is you want a rod that's probably no shorter than 6'6". This is a bait caster. No shorter than 6'6", up to say 7'2". The secret is with a spinnerbait rod, if you're using that single hook, is you don't want it like a crankbait or a jackal rod. You want something really, really fast taper because you're driving that hook, that single hook in. So you want something that's got a nice little bit of tip that you can still cast it, but it's got to have a lot of power in the backbone, because what you want to do is when he hits it, you want to drive that single hook into the corner of his mouth. It's not like where you're using a treble bait where you want more of a rod that's got a lot more parabolic bend to it, because you want to be able to give. With the spinnerbait, what you want to be able to do is drive them hooks in as hard as you can. So that's why you want something with a fast action and bends a little bit at the start and then drops down. Now, when it comes to length of rod, normal size is anything from a 12 to a 17 pound. Every rod has a different version. Some of them, that same rod will be 20 pound. Comes to yourself. How tall you are, how it feels in your hand is a personal choice with rod. A 7-foot rod for me is really good, but then someone like you, Tracy, you might use a 7-foot rod and go, wow, this is ridiculous, it's too big and too heavy and I don't feel like it. So you want to have something around that 7, as I say, 6 foot, 6 to 7 foot is ideal. Reels, you want something realistically. I went from using a lot of slow casting reels to going faster now. 6 foot, a 6 to 3 is basically really pretty good. Up
That's
to
your
7.
gear ratio you're talking about?
That's a gear ratio. What you've got to remember though is 6 3 to 1 is pretty good because you can burn them and you can still stop them. You can do whatever. When you get up to a 7, like I use a lot, you've just got to remember that 7's going to give you one thing I found with a 7-speed gear ratio reel. It gives you more feel because it's like riding a winch on your handle of your boat. The lower the gear ratio, the it's harder to wind. The higher the gear ratio, you can wind it really. It just gives you that 6.3 gives you more feel through the handle because you actually have to wind it faster to get that feel. It doesn't deaden the feel through the handle, but you just got to remember that you are winding it in faster. So it's not really great. I don't really worry too much. In stepping back a bit, it's not really the gear ratio. It's how much inches or centimetres per wind that reel winds in. The problem with fishing industry is every reel company has a different. A 6.3 in a Daiwa might be different in a Shimano, might be different in a Luz, might be different in an Abu. So look at inches per turn. So around about that, anywhere from sort of 26 up to about 30, 31 inches per turn. Anywhere between that, and you'll be pretty right with the spinnerbait.
No, I'm just checking through our other questions as well that we've got.
And I'll talk, when it comes to spin rod,
yes.
Same thing with your gear ratios. With the big thing that we found now, we tend to use with especially the development of braid, we probably use more spin throwing spinnerbaits than what we ever did. The reason being is now because we've used this bait that you can use it in 1 foot of water. One thing spinnerbait can do, you can use it in 1 foot of water and you can use it in 100 foot of water. Spinning rods now have been able to, have given us the technology with the braid to be able to do that. Whatever brand of reel you got, it's the same thing with inches per turn. Just have a look at that. You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to be going too slow. The slower the gear ratio, the less feel you'll get, the less you won't be able to feel those blades kicking through your hand. So if you get like a 4.1 compared to a 5.8, that's what I like using a spin because it's harder to wind, but I can feel those blades moving in a really, really well. What it's enabled us to do now is, as I say, to be able to fish those spinnerbaits a lot deeper and keep them on the bottom. And that's where a spin, reason that be able to do that on spin, because you can run 4 pound, 5 pound, 6 pound, 3 pound line on a spin rod that you can't realistically do on a bait caster unless you're really good at it. So that has opened it up to everyone now that I tend to throw spinnerbaits on my spin gear a lot more. What I do have is a custom, I've got a little short, different situation. I have a shorter spin rod when I'm fishing at dams like Cania, up the back of Somerset, Barumba, where there's a lot of timber, and I just want to flick it off the edge of my rod. So I don't need a really, really long rod because it can get in the road trying to do timber and all that sort of stuff. But then when I'm out in the flats, I'll throw over 7'6", which is 7 foot 6 inches long, where I'm trying to cover as much ground as I can. In those spinnerbaits, you've seen that video we put up there the other day from the old AFC days. We're using a spin rod there. You don't want to be throwing past 27 trees to bring it back because if he hits you that far out, you're gone. So you just want to be keeping them nice little short casts, keeping it nice and close. So therefore, you don't need as long, if you're getting right into it, you don't need as long a spin rod with that.
No, so question, which is actually quite interesting as well, because a lot of lure makers out there say, this lure represents this type of fish. So we've got a question from Pete saying, what do spinnerbaits actually represent, which is, I'm assuming, a species of fish?
It doesn't really represent anything. That for a long time, that's what we were trying to work out. If you think about it, that skirt does in the water. This is where we come back to talking about in the water. Now, there's a million different theories about what a spinnerbait represents. A school of fish, vibration, whatever it is. It doesn't really represent anything per se, because if you think about it, I've caught a lot of fish, for instance, on that spinnerbait. Now, if I seen a fish swimming around the water that had that looked like that with all those different blades and stuff carrying on, there ain't no way I'm going anywhere near it. What it is you're not really, they're not, it's more of a reaction bite. Spinnerbaits are a reaction bite. You know, as I said, you know, in sometimes of the year, spinnerbaits just don't work. They just do not work because those fish aren't active enough, and that's why I'd say in the middle of winter, sometimes you can still catch a few on them, but that's where your spoons, your plastics, your blades, all that stuff comes into their own, because it is a pretty substantial bait if you look at it compared to something else. Is it, you know, that's a lot of coverage that lure that fish has to eat. So generally, it's when those fish are active is when, and they see that, for instance, that white spinnerbait, it's got all this flash goes on. Bass, yellers, cod just go, you know what, I'm just going to smash it. I don't know what it is, but I'm curious. They don't have arms. They can't come up and touch it and feel it. They will jam it and they'll eat it. You see a lot of times they'll eat. You see videos where fish will eat stuff and spit it back out. The only problem with spitting it back out is we've got a couple of 3-0 hooks on there that jam in the side and you can't throw it out. So it's really just a reaction bait. When it comes to different colours, yes, you can try and match those fish, you know, bonies and stuff like that. But what I say to a lot of people is, in certain times of the year when you're using a spinnerbait or a hard body, look at purple. Purple is one of the most popular colours. Everyone's out there, they're throwing a purple hard body fluid. How many purple fish do you see swimming around? But these fish are they're eating gudgeons, they're eating smelt, they're eating crayfish, they're eating bonies. But how many of those lures that look exactly like a bony bream or whatever in the middle of summer will you catch on a lure? You can have a lure that looks exactly like a bony bream. People have done it, trolled it, can't get a bite on it, yet troll a purple lure and smash it. It's that reaction bite. It's something different. There is millions of bait swimming around in these dams. We're talking about dams here. There's millions of fish swimming around, bonies, gudgeons, all that stuff. You're trying to have something you're not matching the hatch. You're trying to have something that's different, that actually attracts their attention. That's what the whole idea of a spinnerbait is you're trying not to match what it's doing. You can change the colour so they can easier for them to see and different things, but you're not trying to make. Otherwise, we'd have every spinnerbait would be silver and look like a bony bream. But you throw them and see how many times you get tailed up. Our most popular spinnerbait and my best of all times, won that many tournaments, is an IB. That's not silver. That doesn't look like a bony brim. That doesn't look like, you know, and people say it might have the crawfish, you know, it's got that bit of orange in it, it looks like crawfish. When you're fishing that in 40 foot of water, aren't yabbies swimming around the top at 40 foot of water or in the top of a tree. So it's just that reaction bite. So don't get too caught up in trying to match the hatch. Certain times of the year when you're using spoons and that, we'll go and do another day, yes, but it's a different time of the year. Most times you're using a spinnerbait is now coming into autumn when it's starting to cool down a little bit, or coming into that spring section, and that's when they really come into their own, when those fish are getting ready to feed up or getting ready to move off into the deep or coming out of the deep back up, and it's a reaction bait. That's the same thing as a jack. It's a reaction bait.
So going back to before when you were describing the different types of blades that you could have on there, obviously you've got your store where you can buy them off the shelf. Say, for example, we've got one of our viewers and he wants to know if he wants a custom build. So if he said to you, I would like this, this and this because of this reason, would you or do you guys do custom builds for orders?
When we have time, we'll do them. We do have a lot of people that normally it's a minimum of 6. Look, we do, I don't know how many thousands, tens of thousands of spinnerbaits a year that we make. We can do, but we normally, takes just as much time, especially the painting, to paint. We have a rack of 13, so we normally keep the racks in lots of 13. We could probably do 6. We can do a one-off, but the problem is people don't want to pay for it. So because it takes a long time, it takes to do one specific colour. It does take, but we can do. Because we make it all here, we can basically do anything. We had a couple of guys in here this morning, obviously, who wanted to know if we can do custom, and they're from down south. They're up here working, and they were from Victoria. They've been out here working, and they said, can we do a custom colour? And I said, yeah, we can, but you're going to have to pay for it. It's like anything custom you don't get for $15, unfortunately.
Of course. So say, for example, like it's not so much about the colour. They're happy with the colour, but it's about changing different parts of the blade. So
you've got to be careful with the blade. We can change the blade, but you've just got to be careful of, if anyone wants to do that, that's what we're talking about now. That we make our blades, we make our spinnerbaits with a certain blade to do a certain job. And we've spent 20 years learning how to do that and making them for that specific reason. We just don't make a lure just for the hell of it. We make a lure that obviously, when we're winning tournaments or doing charters or whatever. So if you want to change it, you can pull that spinnerbait apart. Here's one of the ones we just moulded. You can. That's how they come. That's how we start them. You can see there it's just raw, ready to go. You can put whatever blade you want to on that, but you just got to remember what you want to do with it. And you can buy different blades and you can bend that open and put a different blade on it. But you just got to, as I said before, the best thing to do, which 90% of people do not do, swim it beside your boat first and see what you want it to do. Or if you've got a pool, swim it in your pool. A lot of people don't do it. And just try and remember what you want that spinnerbait to do. Do you want it to sink fast? Do you want more vibration? Do I need to ride it slower? Get a lure with a bigger blade on it. I don't care what brand it is. Get it, swim it fast, and you'll find, I don't care what brand it is, it'll turn. It'll turn like that. If it's not set up properly, this is the simplest way, and I know that every one of our spinnerbaits is done. There's a reason we made them with that blade, is to do it a specific idea. So we've spent hours and hours and weeks to get that to do different than what other things are. A couple of the things that, the biggest thing is obviously you want swivels, which our swivels are made in America, super dear, which is, with everything going, we were actually looking at doing some stuff with China, which everyone else does, which we probably won't, but, obviously that swivel's 10 times dearer than what I can buy a cheaper swivel with. Same with their blades. Those blades are 24 karat gold that we use. We might be looking at doing something with a lacquered brass, which is what everyone else is doing, but it's 1/10 the price. So there's some different things that you can look at why spinnerbaits are dearer. The other thing is we do here, compared to a lot of other people, is see here that's your clevis. They're your little beads, which is your separators. If you have that too close, it'll hit that and it won't spin when you want it to spin. A lot of people will use beads in here because they're cheaper. The reason we don't use beads in there, just for people to look, and this can be any brand, just for when you're next time in the tackle shop, have a look at it. Because what that can do is, if you have beads in between here, especially running through timber, running through weed, what we found is the weed gets caught in between those beads, because that's pushing it up like that. That's pushing it up when you're spinning it, and the weed will get caught in between those beads. That's why we don't run, when people ask why don't we run more beads in between, that's why we do it. Is we have that longer part to give it the separation. It's the exact same right size, but you get less chance. Instead of having 5 different places where weed can grab, there's only a couple. So they're just some little things that obviously we do to get that. It's the same with the Smako. There's a reason why it's done that way. And why it's bent that way is to get it to sit dead straight when you're trolling it. If that was a straight blade, if that was a straight arm, it would not work.
Right. So we talked a lot about trolling and that, but I've got a question coming from Andrew, which is, can you use them fishing edges or almost top water or just subsurface in an early morning bite?
100%. Spinnerbaits is one of the most versatile lures that you can get. As I said, the difference is because they come in 6 or 7 different sizes, doesn't matter what brand it is, have a look at the size. If you want to fish in a creek, obviously we sell a lot of lures to people around here who want to fish in creeks. You can buy a little 1/4 ounce like that. You can buy something that's really small, really 1/4 ounce, smaller blades, or you can buy, if you're cod fishing, a big spinnerbait like that that's got all sorts of crap hanging off it. So that's the beauty of a spinnerbait. So weight comes into what you want to use it for. So if it's an early, and then when it comes to, secret is if you want to keep it shallow and you want to use that, a lot of times we'll use a 5/8 spinnerbait 80% of the time. But I can manipulate that spinnerbait by using my rod. So what I can do is, if I want to use that, the reason I'd be using a 5/8 spinnerbait in water that's only 2 or 3 foot deep or a foot deep, but why would I use that? The reason I want to be able to use that is I want to be able to burn that in that shallow water as fast as I can in some situations, right? So I'll use a 5/8. Now, how to manipulate that is by just holding my rod way up in the air. So if I'm 6 foot and I've got a rod that's 7 foot in a spin or a baitcaster, and I'm holding it 15 or 20 foot up above the water, that line's coming down. So that way I can be winding it and burn it over the top of that weed, stop it when it gets to the edge of the weed, and have it sinking down deep. So I can every cast I can get every bit of coverage that I can get. So that's why I'll use a spinnerbait. But if I was to wind it too fast and go a lighter one, that's when you'll get that roll starting to happen, where you'll get that roll. But there's a situation where you want to wind really slow, then that's different. But normally early morning and stuff like that, when you're throwing a spinnerbait, not so much throwing other lures, it's about getting that reaction.
So I'm not sure whether you've gone over this. Spinnerbaits for me is something very, very new, and there's a massive amount of knowledge. But Simon Carter has asked, tell me if we've gone through this already. How much does the weight of a spinnerbait make a difference? So you said we've got 3 different sizes.
The basic mechanics of a spinnerbait are the same. Say for this one here, doesn't matter whether it's 1/4 ounce, 3/8, 5/8, depending on the blade. That's just your standard, which everyone uses in Australia. That's just your standard tandem, right? That's what it is. Where the weight comes into it is basically fall rate. So obviously that being heavier is going to sink a lot faster through the water, being a 5/8 than what it was a 1/4, a 3/8, or a half. So that's just your day when you're going out fishing. You need to work out whether you want it to, when it hits the water, do you want it to sink fast? Do you want it to sink slower? Are you burning it faster? Are you burning it slower where you can get away with those lighter spinnerbaits? There was a time when we won AFC up at the dam outside kind of the balancing storage outside of Bundy. We were using a 3/8 because it was funny because we had to wind really slow over the top of the weed. If we burn it fast, they wouldn't eat it. But we had to go them and go to a 3/8 or a 1/4 ounce for that very, very reason. So a lot of times in the creeks and the rivers, you want to go 1/4 ounce or a 3/8. You don't want to be going halves or 5/8 because those fish are sitting in structure. They're not like a dam fish. They're totally different. And out here, when we go to Fix and all these places, we're using spinnerbaits that are smaller than what we use for the dam because we want it to more flutter down. We don't want it to sink down really fast because that's not how those fish react. So that's where that weight comes into it. But as I say, just get out and try it. Try a couple of. So as I say, these are a couple of things. Doesn't matter what brand it is. Put it beside the boat. Put it on the water and wind it. Rip it through the water fast. Rip it through it slow, and see what it does. See how it reacts. And you will be surprised how much difference there are in a thing that you think just looks the same.
So we're going to spin back as well to talking about stinger hooks. So Carl's got a question. He said the ones that your ones are free rolling, but you can also get ones with a rubber head that are still rigid. Do the free ones get snagged more?
The reason I don't use, I reckon that the ones that are rigid get snagged more. Because if you think if I'm bumping over and it's just sitting there like that and it's free, a lot of times it'll hit that and bounce up. If it's rigid, it'll hit it and it's rigid, it can't go anywhere. A lot of times it'll twist to the side and get caught into that tree. So that's why I like to have it free like that. It all depends on the shape of this angle here and the angle that comes off the head of how that trailer will sit in that spinnerbait. Because some, if you swim beside the tank, you will see when they're coming through the water, that skirt will be up like that. So if you imagine if that's going that way, and your stinger hook will be down like this. Now, you can, if there's brands out there, and that'll do that. Them ones will get snagged all the time. It depends on the angle. Obviously, I'm not going to go right into it, of how that comes off, depending on where it's pulling, of how that's going to sit, that stinger hook behind. But I like it, if I'm fishing a lot of timber, I'll just take that off. You can just take that stinger hook off. If they're really active, they'll eat on that normal hook anyway. So, but yeah, I like to have that stinger hook loose, because when I found it, when we used to do them solid, it did hook up a lot more. Especially now with tapping the rod and bending it off, a lot more people know how to do all that. Or doing that, being not so rigid, it will pop off really easy.
Yeah. So we've only got a couple more questions from the guys. One of my questions is, before you were showing us just a single piece, like that's how it comes. How many pieces do you have, whether it's your blades and that sort of thing, does it take to put a spinnerbait together?
It takes a fair bit. So I've got, for instance, if I just open this. So realistically, you've got a couple of basic things. So you've got your little clevis, which is that little thing there that sits on. So you've got your clevis. It's more of a gap thing, same as what your stem is, which is what this is called. That little thing in the middle, which is your stem, which we thread onto every lure. And then you've got your skirt that we all hand make, every skirt. Some of these skirts, and a lot of them guys do them. So this is your skirt that you get. I'm just going to go through a little quick tip. So you get your skirt. What you'll see is one is longer than the other. So you can adjust that to wherever you want it, but you want it one longer to the other. The other thing that we see people do is we have them, don't cut the ends off until you've got it on. If you can change a spinnerbait out in the water and change them over, but if you buy a spinnerbait skirt, don't buy them with these already cut, because what will happen is when you go to put it on, everyone's done it, it just goes everywhere, they're all different sizes, different lengths, and you lose half your skirt. So what you do is you get your skirt, like so, and then you have the long bit here. I just grab it like that. So there we see we've got the long bit on the outside, the short bit in the middle. I've just got this spinnerbait here. Let me get that there. I split it to where I want. I just grab it and turn and just pull it, put the hook through, pull that over the little collar, and you will see how it comes dead straight. Now, if I was to have it the other way, what would happen is my skirt, if I had the short side on, so if I just pull this one off, and I do it, so remember the long side on, so if I always do it this way, where I've got the short side, the long side going on first, what would happen is that it'd be like that. It'd be a different size. And then you have to sit there and pull it back out, manipulate it, do all different things to try and get it still. So that's it. You can have this, so with these here, we cut these still, so now I'll cut that off, and that way I can move that. See how easy you move that? Where it's, you know yourself, if you try and do that where they're all being cut, it's nearly impossible, and they'll all be different angles. Some people like them a little bit shorter and have a V, Some people like them dead flat. That's me. I like them flat so they come through like that more to hide. I like having them flat because when they come back through here like that, they'll hide that stinger hook a bit. That's just how I like them. But you can have them. That's the beauty of it. You can have them however you want. Some people like this flared out at the top and have that longer. These are just many, many things that you can do to make a different sort of spinnerbait however you want. So just make sure that collar's done right, the collar's on properly, and then you can just thread it on nice and easy.
So one of our last questions comes from Lisa. How many different colours do you guys have in the spinnerbait range, and how do you come up with colours?
Colours just come out of my head. Sometimes I don't know how I do it. We have, 20 or 30 different colours, I suppose there is. There's ones that have been so... If you were to ask me if I was to go out tomorrow and had to throw a spinnerbait and I was only allowed 2 colours, it would be that one, which is that natural purple. This is 07, and I believe, which is won that many tournaments and that many guys use, and that one's been flogged to death, is out of control. The one in a Smacko that's really taken off, and obviously Chase and Toga, Bob will be watching this one, is the straight white. We had to get that skirt made in the States, and it was dead straight white. That's still probably our most popular with those. It's won every Toga tournament there is. So a straight white one in that blade combination, where you just nice in a 3/8, has won just about every Toga tournament there is. But the one that's really, in the last probably 12 or 18 months, that's really taken off is that one. It's JN. So with that blue, a lot more people are getting into the blue now and realising it's such a great colour. That there has just been absolutely dynamite everywhere in the last 12 to 18 months in that Smak over that 4/8. So that's really, so colours just comes back to, there is not one colour that works all the time. It is a personal choice. It's like if everyone loves purple, it's because everyone's throwing purple. If everyone likes green, because everyone throws green. So, don't be afraid to mix and match. There is not one colour that you'll start at the start of the day and you'll be still throwing at the end of the day. It has happened. It will happen. But what you're trying to do is bring as many things onto your side when you go fishing as you can. So if you've got a lure that's confident in a colour that you're confident with, unless you're sort of fishing everyone else's smash and you're not going to get the hit on it, then keep throwing it, keep using it, because that's your confidence bait. It comes back to confidence. I do believe in it. I know a lot of people don't. I do believe colour makes a massive difference for our Australian fish. Otherwise, we'd all be throwing the same silver lure all the time. It doesn't work like that. Colours are one of those things. So we just try and make different colours that will sort of go through the whole blacks and purples and greens where there's a little bit of contrast in everywhere. So I hope that helps people out.
Wonderful. So we don't actually have any more questions in our queue. Anything else that you've got, Motty, before wrapping up on our...
No, we might run a few more of these if people are interested on different things. We'll share this to our pages if anyone, hopefully it helps people out. It's just, it's a tough time at the moment, but we'll stay safe and all stick with it and then give it hopefully in a couple of months' time we can all get back into it, and some of these tips that you used today you'll be able to go out and have a crack with it. And don't forget the Three Amigos on Wednesday night, where we have a very special guest this week, Motty Fraser, which will be, if you want to talk to a lure maker, top notch.
Excellent. Well, that's a wrap for us, guys, and we're going to sign out for the rest of the day.
Righto, guys, be safe. Talk to you next time.
See yous.